So I thought we would start off with everyone introducing themselves.
Good morning. I am Pierre Titeux from Société Générale. I am the digital officer in charge of global finance. I have a PhD in computer science and artificial intelligence. So it was years ago. So now I see the evolution of the field, and we apply machine learning in our business.
My name is Joshua Bauer-Sol, and I'm the CEO of Cybertonica. Cybertonica is a platform that is data agnostic, but we use data through machine learning and artificial intelligence to discern risk, and we apply that in a number of fields. I've been working in this area for, well, you could say 15 years, because my first attempt at understanding itineraries of vehicles in cities dates from 1999, so pre-Uber by a long shot. And today I'm really excited to see what artificial intelligence is going to become in my lifetime.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Tom Nash. I'm the CEO and CTO of MarketsFlow. We apply machine learning to wealth management, and we have a platform for which uses machine learning-based algorithms for asset allocation and active rebalancing.
Great, so I thought we'd start off by getting a clarity on the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what is the difference in your minds?
Machine learning, it's a well-known field with techniques like supervised learning, unsupervised learning. My opinion is that artificial intelligence is more fuzzy because it's a moving frontier. Let's take an example. For chess, years ago, it was considered a complex task by human, and when it was when a machine won a competition against the world master, afterwards, it was not considered artificial intelligence. So the frontier is moving. That's my opinion.
Machine learning is basically an input to artificial intelligence from my point of view. I think machine learning is sort of automating pattern recognition at its most fundamental. And when you do that, you can tell the pattern in the rose window in Notre Dame, but you can't tell what it is. Artificial intelligence takes it to a different level, using fuzzy logic and other principles to understand what that represents in meaning. So it's a much more elevated level of linguistics, whereas ML is really about the maths of understanding patterns and pattern recognition.
Sure, okay. Well, I think both of these areas, ML or AI, are quite vast to sort of explain for this session.
Clarity is not going to be easy.
Indeed, but what I will say is, in terms of machine learning, I think you have unstructured data, which is not actionable, or you can't have any actionable insights out of unstructured data. You use machine learning techniques to supervise unstructured data to a point where it is enough structured data so that you can have insightful actions based on that. Whereas artificial intelligence is sort of where you've got enough data captured over time where you apply a layer on top of data, which is then able to make decisions on its own based on circumstantial occurrence, i.e. this person should cross the road or not. But that's left to it. So a very simple example, but it could be applied to aviation and so on.
Great, wonderful. Just a quick question for Pierre. I mean, in terms of, do you think that artificial intelligence and machine learning is being applied successfully in, say, financial industries?
Yes, I think there are more and more use cases in the financing industry. I will give you an example. Have you ever seen a legal contract on structured finance? For example, to finance a project. That's hundreds of pages. Maybe there are lawyers in the audience, but for non-lawyers, it's very complex. And so when you have to review a legal contract, it's a nightmare. So what we did is a virtual assistant who has been trained to read a legal contract, spot the various clauses, and recommend what needs to be done on these clauses. That's very useful, very amazing. Others have also been investing in this area. So that's an example of use case in the financing industry.
So just out of curiosity, can you just explain a little bit more about the types of, how you're doing it? How are you actually doing this sort of text analytics on contracts?
You mean in the techniques?
Like the tools, yeah. Maybe like what algorithms you're using and so forth, out of curiosity.
When you want to build this kind of solution, you need a machine learning library. Nowadays, the state of the art is open source. For example, we use scikit-learn with Python, gradient boosting, also neural networks with Keras and TensorFlow. So we use this kind of technology to train a model with examples and afterwards to iterate using this technology.
And what about, I mean, other examples of use cases where people are using AI and machine learning? Open it up.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, Tom.
I think what I understand at the moment, I think the primary use is on back office, middle office, general operational sort of things. However, I think where there are repetitive tasks and you want to automate them and you want to sort of, where simple sort of, input-output based decisions are made. But I think there is now more focus on front office where investment decisions are being made, how your portfolios are being at a strategy level created, the construct element, the market timing, the market cycles, the exposure to the markets at any point, understanding better returns, outperformance of the benchmarks, and using quantitative means to be able to be better informed, be more agile. So that's where I think this focus now.
I mean, you're at a bank, so do you think people can use this to make more money?
Yeah, I wanted to address that, actually. I was going to say, there's a lot being done, but I think there's a great deal that can be done beyond that. I mean, if you look at just basic everyday things that people in this room do, like real estate conveyancing and mortgages, right? Try to get a mortgage on a house in France with a British bank account, an American passport, and a Ukrainian wife, and you'll see that it's quite complex. And it shouldn't be. I always give the example of trying to change your cable operator when you move house within London with the same bank, etc. And it takes 45 minutes on the phone. I don't know what kind of intelligence is at the other end of that phone line. I don't think it's human. I don't know if it's artificial. But those things should not be. And I think what you're seeing today, like if you take what we do, we look at 10,000 events a second to decide a transaction that takes 60 milliseconds, right? That's the type of thing that we can do that humans simply can't do. And it opens up a whole new raft of money-making possibilities, to be honest, because you can give people mortgages, you can make people make payments, you can take out the fraud while increasing the conversion rates. That's what it's all about. It's about opening doors.
So I'll come back to the jobs in a moment and replacing the humans with perhaps something that's more intelligent or not. But in terms of, do we sometimes mistake automation for AI and vice versa? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Because it seems to me that, that it's a very fuzzy word.
Yes, currently there's a lot of hype with what's called robotic process automation. Yeah. In fact, it's not a robot. It's a simple task performed the same way all the time, and that's not
AI.
AI or machine learning. So these use cases, they should be better addressed with good processing and a good information system. On the other hand, when you have a complex task by humans, it makes sense to automate. For example, when you have huge volume of data to process, and in this area, we'll have a very strong benefit.
Excellent. What is your thoughts about like automation versus AI and stuff? Or do people just tagging on the .ai and trying to make more money from it and not actually doing it?
It'll always be, sorry, Joshua, do you want to? Yeah, it'll always be the case. I think if you look at GPS, the rerouting, that's been there for a long time, and that was part of sort of AI at that point, and same thing with mapping now. Now, yes, it's true, as always with .com or whatever, there's always a trend, and people want to ride on it with cryptocurrency or whatever. I mean, so there will be things which are simple automation but used as AI. But I think specifically in the field of fund management, there are certain aspects, certainly the back office, middle office, where it is very automated. It's reconciliations done, end-of-day balances or whatever. But certainly where it's at idea generation, where markets are so dynamic, where sector rotation is happening on a weekly basis, or midweek there are reversals, and where a human, by the previous process where you were buying sell-side reports and you were making decisions, I think this is where you need to be agile, you need to be better informed at a shorter time duration, and you need a platform or a machine which will do the processing for you and make those decisions for you. I think that's where there's real sort of value for AI. And
Go ahead, Joshua.
I was just going to say, if you look in any brokerage, and I had a RegTech AI business before, the kinds of processes that they do in spreadsheets, if you can automate that, they will consider that artificial intelligence, right? And that's a fact, that there's a lot of automation that's going to come there. But I think what we have to keep remembering, maybe it's even better than our first definitions, mine in the case of ML versus AI, is that ML creates contextual information, and AI understands it. So in the case of a trading decision, you're trying to create contextual information that is rich enough that another level of application can understand it and draw inferences and make decisions. So it's not just automation. It shouldn't be, in my view.
Yeah, and I have another example in financing industry. It's to manage the business. For example, to manage the risk, to predict the evolution of the business. And it's an area when you apply either machine learning or deep learning, you can have better insights than using traditional methods.
So you're able to predict the future?
At least we can, for example, predict the evolution of the default rate in a loan portfolio. In a specific context, it's possible to predict precisely the evolution of a context.
Right. Let's take it up a level and look at the broader implications society-wise in terms of artificial intelligence. So making the assumption that it's not all bullshit and hype, AI, what is it going to do to our societies? Joshua?
Well, I think if you look at the Google Brain Project, Geoffrey Hinton, that group, Canada, UK, Hinton is one of those Brits who's going to change the world, and partly because he's working with Google. He famously said, computers will understand sarcasm before Americans do, which I love. But I think if you look at that crowd of people and what they've been able to achieve in 4 or 5 years, I think he joined Google in 2013, something like that. The Brain Project now, the efficiency of the inference models that they're using, it's 100 times what it was when they started. And that's in 3 years, 3-4 years. Now, when you bring those communities together, you're going to get to a level where, yes, we can really change society. What does it mean for society? A lot of people are worried about losing jobs. Well, I think there are a lot of trading jobs that are going to be harder to justify unless you're a real genius in, I don't know, fractal mathematics or something. But there's another whole part of the world where the kinds of things that Cybertonica does, for example, if you take a person who has a mobile phone and a prepaid card in an outlying part of Africa and can give that person a credit rating so that they can get a loan to start a chicken farm, that can change their world many, many times faster than it can change our world about getting, cable service, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's a reality that we tend to forget. We think of artificial intelligence as being at this very high level of society. But the reality is that getting people into the financial system, becoming economic stakeholders, is partly about resolving complexity. And the real problem our society is facing is density of information and complexity.
Sure, yeah.
And our brains simply are not big enough to deal with it without the help of artificial intelligence. Jobs said that the computer was a bicycle for the mind. Artificial intelligence is a helicopter. It's a totally different level.
And Tom, what is your thoughts on the impact of AI on a broader level? Say, looking the impact on cities, for example.
So, there's this word efficiency. I think this will go a level higher than that. It'll be at an optimization level. So you'll use AI to optimize because you'll have enough data points to then able to understand if you have a flow of people here, you'll save 2 minutes out of everybody's journey because that's how you route the flow or whatever. So I think it'll be, AI is going to improve everybody's lives because it'll be more optimized. People will know where their skills lie and they'll be directed that way. In fact, I think to some extent, employers are going to know beforehand the type of employees which are going to best fit where. So I think there's this optimization at all levels.
So driving optimization. At this point, if there's any questions, feel free to put your hand up and we can take any questions from the audience. If there's anyone that have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Just holler and I'll grab it. In terms of things like, I always find this fascinating. People are worried about the loss of jobs. What's your thoughts on that?
If we look back at history, jobs have been created in industry, in services. On the other hand, we replaced jobs in farming or industry. So new jobs are created and jobs are replaced. And on the positive hand, we can see that the boring parts of the jobs are now automated. It creates an opportunity to focus on added value, on creativity. And if you take, for example, the example of chess, now the most efficient way to play chess is a human plus machine. So it didn't replace humans. So if we use machines and humans, we'll be more efficient in the future.
But what will those people do that are automated out of jobs, like truckers? What do you think, Joshua?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because it was something that came up very early in one of the pieces of work I did with a PhD student in this logistics thing I was doing. And right now, there's a company that I mentored in California working on the efficiency of bus routing systems. And the outcome is that 30% of the drivers would be able to do something else. I put it that way. And what could they do? Well, they could become a sort of service that personalizes the bus service, right? You could have, instead of Uber, a transport system in a responsive city, what you were talking about, responsive city transport, transport on demand, that would be the same types of people, but in different roles. So I think there's going to be a job transformation level, that's for sure. If you talk about truckers in the U.S., which I didn't know it was that big a population, by the way, I learned that it's
massive.
Yeah, it's massive, like 15%.
And there's the knock-on impact of the hotels, the restaurants, the gas stations that service them.
I think all of that is actually going to be transforming over a slow burn, and that will free up a lot of people to do things that we need doing, like building and installing solar energy, right? Making things that we otherwise are wasting human productivity on.
But some are arguing that this transition time frame will be very difficult because it's sometimes very difficult for some people to retrain. So it sounds great on paper, but in practice, retraining tens of thousands or millions of people who have been displaced becomes really hard. So what happens to society when tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people are out of jobs?
I don't know. If you look at the leadership we have today, I'm not sure we'll even make it that far. But I think the reality...
Perhaps there's a role for AI there.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, when you have a clown with his finger on the nuclear button, and the worst thing about today's reality is that we don't know which clown I'm talking about. If you look at it that way, then you have to say, yeah, okay, at the time there were hackney carriages outside this location 100 years ago, and everybody was living off the horse trade, right? That's over. And that period of transition was very difficult. There's no doubt there's going to be social difficulty.
So any questions? Go ahead.
I'm keen to know from the panel, what is the most disruptive technology that they are aware of and they have to reveal all in the foreseeable future, and what that implications are for that industry? Thank you.
I think we have to be agnostic of the technology. It depends on the use case. In some use cases, simple methods, simple algorithms are the best performing. And in other use cases, it's other algorithms. For example, if you look at the competitions on Kaggle, Kaggle is a platform for for data science competitions. And when you see the results, it's not always the neural networks that win the competitions. Half of the time, it's ensemble or gradient boosting methods. Half of the time, it's neural networks. So it depends on the use case. For example, for text mining, you'd use a specific kind of technology. To predict markets activities, you'll need another technology. So our advice is to get...
Tom, what is your thoughts on the most disruptive technology?
Well, I'll speak of my experience. So I think it's platforms. So the ability to run multiple funds at the same time and to be able to optimize and to be able to run, so previously BlackRock needed, in order to run 5 funds, needed X amount of resources, X amount of supply chains. You could do that now in a matter of 2 days. The fact that that scalability is going to run at the level, the consolidation, so that's one example.
Great. Josh, what do you think is the most disruptive technology?
I think it's got to be, without a doubt, neural networks. And I think I can say that word proudly now, because in 10 years ago, that was a fuzzy, futuristic kind of thing to say. But I think that is happening now. And I think what makes it possible is actually the kind of work you guys do, simulation being merged with machine learning and linguistics. And as a former interpreter, I come from a linguistic background originally. And understanding the way those two worlds interface is what the Google Brain Project is about, for example. So I think it's the realization of the 90s dream of neural networks. That's
Absolutely
what I think.
agree. Other questions? No? Go ahead.
The invention of transport can be argued to have made people unhealthier because we stopped using our normal, whether we're walking, everything. But it was optimization if you wanted to get from one point to another. Are we about to do the same thing to our brains?
Oh, great question. So is through our optimization going to cause us to destroy our brains? Yeah, it's a great question. Do you want to take it, Josh? Go ahead, Joshua.
I just have a take on this. It's that, I'm not that old, but I had a much younger person say to me, I can't get around in a city without my phone, right? You can plug me down in any city and I'll find my way. But that's because we learn maps. And people who are under 25 do not learn how to use a map. So I think there's a laziness that comes with it. Now, to go from there to say we're going to destroy our brains is wrong, because remember that when lifts first came into service, there were theories published in newspapers about how people would have shorter legs because they wouldn't go upstairs. I mean, nobody knew anything about genetics either then, right? So I think what we are going to face, though, is augmented competition from people we didn't expect to compete with us. And that actually is going to augment our striving to be smarter. But I think there's a whole population today that's at risk. Let's just put it this way. We're giving smarter and smarter phones to dumber and dumber people. That's for sure. And you could launch a rocket with a phone today compared to in computing power. So, but nobody's launching rockets. They're playing Candy Crush or something.
What do you think, Pierre? What is your thoughts on this? Are the computers atrophy, causing our brains to atrophy?
My intuition is that, on the contrary, as repetitive tasks will be more and more automated, we'll need to be more creative. So, in some sense, it will rely on our brain, and it will suppress the laziness.
Excellent. Other questions? Lady up front here. I'll repeat the question.
Have you used AI platforms for idea generation? Is this something where you see potential, or do you have any FS use cases?
So the idea is using AI for idea generation. So has SocGen done that?
At SocGen, we have idea generation with humans, and it's very, very effective.
Okay, excellent. All right, what do you think, Tom?
So what do you mean by idea generation? So
I think that came off the back of your statement that you could use AI.
Okay, sure. So in terms of investments, certainly, indeed, very much so. Because, in fact, that's exactly where the real use case is. Because you've got enough humans right, Joshua absolutely rightly pointed out, do not have the thinking capability beyond a certain hierarchical thinking levels.
They're not smart.
What's that?
They're not smart.
No, not at all. The system is. But yes, absolutely. This is one area where you can have multitude of strategies within minutes, whereas previously you had a team of analysts sitting there and coming up with, very few.
The interesting thing is, because this goes way back for me, I did a lot of innovation consulting and looked at all the platforms that were out there from the beginning at MIT with crowdsourcing when it was a new word, and working with boardrooms around the world on this idea generation task. You can go back to Altenberger in the Soviet Union, the guy who came up with the idea of the principles of idea generation as a science, right? Innovation as a science is only 50, 60 years old, really. And the interesting thing is that what I've learned in all of that is you can use platforms or AI or technology as much as you want, but if you don't have a goal shared by a community of people, there's no point, right?
Great. Other questions? Sorry, I'll come to you next. Go ahead.
I'll chat. So we've talked about how AI is being increasingly used in business, but how do you get comfortable relying on AI with no human oversight? I mean, things like the flash crash, how do we make sure that doesn't happen when we're increasingly relying on increasingly complex systems?
So the question is basically letting the artificial intelligence make the decisions without humans in the loop, and then an allusion to the flash crashes stuff. So can I take the flash crash stuff because of our stuff with for high frequency trading? So keep in mind the flash crash is not, it's dumb algorithms. It's not AI, right? So you have to be really careful because a lot of times people will look at complex systems or what they think is complex, and they're actually quite simplistic approaches being used. So I think that's an issue. But for the panel, in terms of should we let the AIs make the decisions without humans being involved?
I think that's a great point. You're absolutely right. A dumb person designing an AI will be dumb. So it's true. So you've got to be careful that the people who design the AI factor in all the aspects. So one of the things we do or ought to be done is tolerance or risk tolerance. So what happened with flash crash created, and I'm not sure if that was before, circuit breakers. So you've got to have that. You cannot allow things like that to happen, whether those are excuses now that, oh, this flash crash. I mean, nobody knew the answer back then. So I think you've got to put tolerance and configuration layers into it.
Josh, what are your thoughts?
I mean, there's definitely the garbage in, garbage out problem. But in Cybertonica, one of the things we do that's unique is we do something that's called adversarial learning. So there are lots of technologies in the actual machine learning itself, right? So there's supervised, unsupervised learning. You use different types of technologies to do random forest or whatever. But one of the things that few people do is an adversarial learning system which tests the system for its conclusions as it's growing. And I think you guys probably know this from simulations, that's the only way to not overfit data. Overfitting data is the biggest problem in machine learning, right? So you get a perfect model that sinks the ship, basically. And that's, I think you've hit that's a sore point in the industry.
Do we have time for one more question or no? Okay, great. So let's give a hand to our panel. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights.